Welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm your host, Pete Mezzetti. My guest this evening is Glenn Lungarini, who's the Executive Director of the CIAC. Glenn, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Pete. Thank you for the opportunity to come tonight. Very excited to speak with you.
Thanks for coming down. And nice to finally meet you. We've been talking and emailing, and it's nice to finally have you down.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. So, Glenn, tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been with the CIAC and what exactly you guys do.
This is my third year as Executive Director of the CIAC. Prior to coming here, I spent 19 years in public education and as well as coaching. That included teaching at the elementary, middle school, and high school level as a health and physical education teacher. Also served as an administrator, as an athletic director, an assistant principal, and a principal.
Wow.
And from a coaching standpoint, I've had the pleasure of coaching everything from middle school girls basketball and middle school soccer to high school soccer and baseball, and spent 7 years as an assistant baseball coach at Yale University.
Oh, wow.
So it was really enjoyed my time in public education and in coaching, and just had the fortunate opportunity to apply for the position that I hold now with the CIAC and the Connecticut Association of Schools.
So the Connecticut Association of Schools and the CIAC, they're linked together?
They are. The parent company is the Connecticut Association of Schools. So
okay.
that is the main organization, and then CIAC is a subgroup of that. It's very much like a school would run, where the athletic department is part of the school. This is the same thing. It's the Connecticut Association of Schools, and then off of that, the CIAC has its own board of directors.
Right.
That board of directors does answer to the CAS board of directors, and so CIAC controls the athletic portion of the company, and we are a private nonprofit organization. Okay. We are a member-based organization, so our membership are the schools that join us.
Yeah.
From the Connecticut Association of Schools side, the CAS side. That includes elementary, middle, and high schools.
Okay.
Public, private, and parochial. On the CIAC side, it's mostly high schools. We only govern high school sports. We don't govern middle school sports. So we have just over 180 high schools in Connecticut, public, private, and parochial, that are part of our membership. And the CIAC Board of Control, the voting members of the board are made up of all principals and assistant principals of our organization. And that's a big, I think, misconception that's out there. I think the understanding amongst the general public is that it's the CIAC staff and that make the rules, that create things, that vote on things.
Right.
As the executive director of the organization, I do not have a vote on any board. So it is the principals of our member schools that are the voting members of the board, and the principals of our member schools make up our legislative body. So when we vote on bylaw changes or things like that, it goes out to the vote of our full membership at the end of the year on those topics, which is just under 1,000 member schools at this point.
Oh, wow. That's pretty impressive.
It's a very diverse group.
Yeah.
In addition to the work that we do with governing athletics on the Connecticut Association of Schools side, we're very intimately involved in the professional development of teachers, of administrators, looking a lot, right now, of course, looking at bridging that gap in technology, helping people understand that technology divide and how we can bring that closer. Very timely with what we're doing now. We do a lot of work on equity as well, and looking at social justice and that work right now. And then we also represent our schools in terms of legislature. So I will often be at the legislative office building on topics and bills of either education nature or athletics to share the point of view of our memberships on that.
Okay. And recently, obviously, you've been on the news.
Once or twice.
Yeah, maybe once or twice. And let's talk about exactly what the Board of Control does.
Sure. So again, the Board of Control, so the CIAC, the way that the framework of the organization works is we have the Board of Control, which again is 19 member principals and assistant principals. Okay. Beyond that, there are other members of the board who are there in a consultant capacity.
Got it.
That includes athletic directors, coaches, superintendents, athletic trainers, and officials. We also have some of our staff that join those meetings as well, just to provide information and to inform people throughout the process. Now, under that Board of Control, it branches off, so each individual sport has its own sport committee. The purpose of those sport committees are to look at the individual sport and think about what's in the best interest of those sports. They will look at and review the updates of rules that come out of the National Federation of High School. They'll think about the way that tournaments are run, who qualifies for tournaments, what the bracket setups are for those. They'll look at the breakout of divisions, whether it's 4 divisions, 3 divisions, 5 divisions. At what cutoff point do we have for small, medium, large, double L? Mm-hmm. And so those are all the things that the sport committees do. They'll select the sites for tournaments, and the board really gives a lot of autonomy in terms of the individual sport to those committees. If there's anything that's being approved that requires a rule change, ultimately that would come back to the Board of Control. Yeah. Or if there's anything that one sport committee is looking at that would have impact on another, that would come back to the Board of Control. A recent one that we reviewed quite extensively was the thought of moving boys golf from the spring to the fall. Okay. And so while that was looked at through the golf committee, that decision ultimately came down to the Board of Control, and they had to factor in as well, how would this impact fall sports? How would this impact schools that share a golf coach between a men's team and a women's team? Would there be a financial impact to that? What would the courses around the state in terms of availability be able to offer? Right. So there were a lot of considerations that needed to go into that beyond just the sport itself.
Okay. Now, as far as fall sports go, how closely did you guys work with the governor and the governor's office?
The governor's office was very supportive with us in terms of discussions, in terms of being able to reach out and have conversations. Paul Mounds, the governor's chief of staff, was very accessible. Through our firm, Mike Rell, who works as the lobbyist for CIAC and CAS, he was able to frequently have contact and communication with them as well. So they were responsive throughout, and working with the governor's office, and I think that is a big part of the fall. When I talk to my colleagues from around the country, there's been a lot of kind of thoughts and questions about how are other states playing, right? And we're not, right? But if you look around us and you look at the states that aren't playing, we find a commonality between those that are not playing and those that are playing, and the commonality is that besides Pennsylvania, pretty much every other state that we talked to and we looked at align with their governor's office. Yes. So if you're playing because you have the blessing of the governor's office to do it. If you're not playing, it's because you don't have the blessing of your governor's office, so you're aligning with looking at a time later in the year. Right. There's been a lot of attention paid to states that have flopped recently. Looking at, for example, Delaware. I think Virginia just changed today. Okay. Actually, Michigan a few weeks ago, where they were looking at playing in the spring. Right. But now we're playing in the fall. Okay. And again, a common element of those is the Michigan governor, the Delaware governor, the Utah governor, saying, listen, we're going to give this a shot and we're going to go ahead and play. The states that had that blessing were able to move forward. The ones that don't are just looking at the spring, and we're not unique in that. Maine, Rhode Island, I think saw a very similar course as we did, where they presented plans that included playing in the fall. And then their DPH and their governor's office said, well, we don't think this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And those sports moved to a later time.
Absolutely.
So, very common to where we are. A lot of people point to New Jersey because New Jersey's playing.
Yep.
Again, the governor came out and said, we're playing football. But ironically, in New Jersey, the governor came out and said, but we're not playing volleyball. So
really?
they're not playing volleyball, nor are they having, in the fall in New Jersey, they have volleyball and gymnastics.
Sure.
And they are not playing either of those this fall.
Oh, wow.
Those are being moved to a later time in the year.
Okay.
But they are playing football.
Ah.
Now, Rhode Island, Maine, we're all, Connecticut, we're playing volleyball, but we're not playing football.
Right.
So.
Now, as far as football goes, there was a little bit of talk of maybe moving it to the spring. Could that still happen?
Yeah, initially our board was not in favor of that, and I think that's largely our focus was always on playing this fall.
Right.
And again, while we made the decision to not play this fall in alignment with the recommendation of the Department of Health and the governor's office,
sure.
I do think we largely believe that the data that we were looking at, that we continue to look at, the support of our medical doctors, the epidemiologists that we spoke to, all believe that you could play now.
Right.
And it is safe to play now with appropriate COVID mitigating strategies in place, which we did believe that we presented, but we were not able to convince DPH that we could meet that standard, so presents the situation that we have. Right. And trying to make that push, focusing all of our efforts on playing this fall, and really concerned about the spring kids. Those spring athletes lost everything last year.
Yeah.
So when you think about playing in the spring, we didn't want to just take football and say, the easy thing to do would be say, let's just put it in the spring like some of these other states have done.
Right.
We wanted to fight as much as we could to play this fall. And in our last meeting, again, understanding on September 3rd when we made the decision that we were not going to be playing full contact football this fall.
Right.
And then the week later, we had the meeting with DPH. Coming off of that meeting, again, getting their recommendation that they were not going to change their opinion on playing full contact football. Right. The board stayed with its decision to not play full contact, and in our last meeting did say that we would look at an opportunity later in the year to play. Okay. But there's some criteria that we want to understand before we really make the commitment of the time frame for that. We want to understand and know how many other sports are affected. Right. Because right now we know that football is not playing. But we're still a week away from all of our other sports actually getting into game competition. October 1st is the first date of games. Right. We do watch the data while right now the data is supporting us continuing to move forward. Okay. We are seeing a number of schools in Connecticut that have had to shut down for small periods of time because of some positive COVID tests. Right. When we look at some of the states around us, again, just having a conversation with other state executive directors this morning, listening to one of our colleagues in Maine, where they've had several schools that they have reached what's considered an outbreak status in their schools, so the entire districts have shut down. Okay. So we are seeing that in some states. Right now in Connecticut, we continue to do exceptionally well, but you can't in a COVID environment ever predict what tomorrow or next week is going to bring. Of course not. So it's important for us to understand what sports are we successfully getting off and playing, right? And be able to forecast a little bit more out to the winter to understand what may we be able to play and what we may not be able to play. So whatever we cancel, right? If we move one sport, then we would owe it to that other sport as well. Right. And it's not that we wouldn't be willing to do that, but at some point, if too many sports get canceled, you just don't have the time or the ability to do that. And that's kind of what played out in the spring.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, as far as winter sports go, how are things looking? Or is it too early to?
Cautiously optimistic.
Oh, all right.
So
I'll take that answer.
We'll go with that. If there's something that we learned from our experience in the fall and working with the Department of Health, I would say you look at the opportunity that's given for you to play and you take that opportunity. So, we're really looking to see while, again, right now the season would start December 3rd. We'll look very closely at how our numbers are doing. I think recently, last week sometime, I believe Governor Lamont had shared and said that, he's hopeful that we're going to see schools in full capacity across the state as we get towards, maybe the end of October, November.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And so if our numbers continue very well, if we're back in full capacity in a number of districts and, we're seeing very strong models of hybrid learning taking place where we can potentially start those winter opportunities a little bit earlier, it will be a consideration for us to look at. Again, that would help us with a scenario where we were trying to create a kind of fourth season, if you will, to put some of or an alternative season to do this. But again, as much as possible, we don't want to diminish any experiences from the winter or the spring. The winter lost their state championships last year.
Yes, that's right.
We want those kids to play for a state championship if COVID allows this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've got to let you know, 'cause I'm actually a volunteer coach myself for Morgan out of Clinton. I do lacrosse. I'm director of social media for the boys lacrosse team, and we had no season last year. It's like
right.
And all the other coaches that are on the shoreline, we all keep in contact throughout the year. So it's like there's no lacrosse season. It's like, oh no. So we all hopped on a Zoom call and made sure everybody was okay, and I said the same thing. I'm like, better safe than sorry, because you don't want to get sick, and then that would not be a good thing.
And Pete, I think what you saw then with the kids coming together online.
Oh yeah.
And trying to again just connect with each other, and the amazing work by our coaches.
Right.
And you're seeing that now. I mean, when you think of what's happening right now with football. We certainly respect and understand the frustration of our kids and our coaches, but we really need to share with them just how proud we are of them. These kids are still out there working. They're going to be able this fall to engage in low to moderate risk activities, so there's going to be some experiences that these kids can engage in. It's not what they were, planning for. They want to have that full contact, and we understand that, but more than anything, what I think we learned through that winter and the spring, and what we're seeing now, it's really at the end of the day, yes, you want to compete, yes, you want to play for that championship, but it's not about the wins and losses,
right?
And it's not about the championship. And one of the valuable lessons we learn just in playing sports, two that I think really stand out with this. One is how to overcome adversity. You learn that probably in sports as well as you do in any other venture in life. To learn how to overcome adversity and the value of long-term, short-term goals. And the other piece is really enjoying the moments that you have.
Absolutely.
And, our kids right now and our coaches, those relationships that they're building, those meaningful bonds and ties to their school, their community, to their peers and their coaches, those are the things they carry with them. I'm sure there's kids that you still talk to from those Morgan teams, years ago.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And those are that's really the meaningful part.
Oh, yeah.
That comes back and really ties. And that's even for me. I mean, I could remember. A lot of stuff. There's a few games that kind of stick out in my mind along the years, but even as a player, I was fortunate enough to play for Eastern Connecticut State University, and we won the national championship in 1998. And of all the games and what we played, and playing for a storied franchise and Coach Bill Holwady, it's the relationships. It's the time with my roommates and my teammates and coaches that that really stick with me. It's the experience with my parents, coming to California to watch me play, in Virginia, and being there. And I can't tell you, I can't remember if what I hit or what I did in that championship game. I know we won by a pretty good margin, but what I remember most is when it was over, my dad being out on the infield and giving him a hug between first base and second base.
There you go.
And that's the moment that I won't forget from winning a national championship. And so, as frustrating and disappointing as it is right now to not play football, and as it was to not play for that basketball championship or play that spring season, when kids have the benefit of time to look back on things, it's going to be the relationships that they carry with them.
Oh, absolutely.
And again, and along the way, we're going to keep fighting to provide the kids as much of that experience that they're looking to get that full experience as possible. But we also know we have such a special group of coaches and athletic directors and principals that are working with their kids on a local level. That's going to make every experience they have special.
Absolutely. And you and I actually have another mutual friend. That would be Bob Rader from Cave.
Yeah,
our buddy.
Bob's a great guy. Really have enjoyed the past 2 years and getting to know Bob and Patrice McCarthy over there at Cave. Just two wonderful people. As stressful as times are right now,
oh, yeah.
Boards of education are just as challenged, and just got to give a lot of credit to our boards of ed, to our superintendents for the leadership and the perseverance that they're showing right now as well. Again, I think for boards, I think just the big misconception for boards from last year, coming in is that, look, the schools went virtual, they're online, so there must be a windfall of money.
Yeah,
there.
right.
And that was not the case, and still is not the case. Teaching through COVID and educating kids through COVID is an incredibly expensive endeavor, and our boards of ed, our superintendents and our principals are just doing an amazing job to work with the teachers and provide just great experiences for our kids.
Now, how closely do you work with the athletic directors and all the coaches?
We work pretty closely together. Once we went out in March, it was about 2 weeks after we held our first kind of informal Zoom meeting with ADs, just to keep them up to date of where we are. And we said, well, as long as there's interest in this, we'll keep doing it. And that started, I said, the second week after we canceled in March. This past week, I still had 170 on the call.
Okay.
So I think there's still interest, and which is great. We really enjoy the conversations with the athletic directors. I think again, I've had the fortune to serve in all those administrative roles. Department chair, AD, assistant principal.
Right.
The athletic director position by far is the most thankless job anybody will ever hold. I don't think people understand just how valuable they are, how hard they work, how much time they give up for the benefit of kids, how student-centered they are, and we have a very talented group of athletic directors in Connecticut.
Absolutely.
And so it's just, I'm very fortunate to have a good relationship with our athletic directors and really appreciate the hard work that they put in. Coaches just as well, Connecticut High School Coaches Association, just a tremendous organization. Very, very sad and the loss of John Fontana at the end of last year, who was the longtime executive director of the Connecticut High School Coaches Association. And big shoes to fill. They hired Joe Canzanella, who is a legend in his own right, to step in there, and Joe is just doing a tremendous job with the Connecticut High School Coaches Association. We talk frequently with each other, especially as we've been going through this. Joe has been, very advocating very well for his coaches, sharing their concern and their desire for a spring season for the kids for football, but at the same time advocating for other spring coaches that they don't want to see their sports necessarily lose out because they lost their entire season. So our athletic directors, our coaches association, Fred Balsamo, executive director of the Connecticut Association of Athletic Directors, has been fantastic to communicate with as well. And as I said, I think with all the stakeholders we have putting this together, we always keep the focus on the best interest of the kids with a good group of dedicated coaches and ADs. And for the most part, I think when everything is settled and is done, our kids benefit from having exceptional experiences because of their dedication.
Would you mind sticking around for another segment?
Be happy to.
All right, we'll be right back.
Community TV, your neighborhood TV.
Publicly funded and a reliable partner for cable companies nationwide. It provides transparent coverage of local and state government, education, and public programming.
A digital town green that can be watched anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
Watch us on today's high-tech distribution methods.
Community TV in Connecticut.
Local,
unfiltered,
reliable, and yours.
You're doing great. We're gonna try this again, okay?
Okay.
Wheels, pedals, handlebar, brakes. Sit up straight, keep your weight in the center, keep your eyes on the road, hands on the grips, button the seat. If we feel ourselves falling, what do?
Just keep pedaling.
Good girl. Now remember, it's all about balance and steering. Steer with your hands, steer with your body. Steer into the corners and you stay out of trouble. And the bell's your buddy, so go ahead and ding that. All right, you ready? Here we go. Pedal, honey, pedal. There you go, you're a bike rider.
Most parenting is hard to do in just 2 minutes. But 2 minutes twice a day making sure they brush is easier, and it could help save them from a lifetime of tooth pain.
And welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm sitting here with Glenn Lungarini, Executive Director of the CIAC. Glenn, welcome back.
Thank you again.
Thank you. So, Glenn, we were talking in the first segment about what's going on with the CIAC and fall sports and winter sports. Now, what if they move the winter sports to the spring? What do they do with spring sports?
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why we haven't come out just yet with specific dates in terms of that alternative season.
Right.
We really need to understand a little bit better what the guidance is going to be around the winter.
Okay.
We have again a tremendous talented group of doctors and physicians that we work with, and we have our perception on that. My understanding is the guidance for the winter activities from DPH hasn't been set just yet.
Right.
So we're keeping an eye out for that to see when that comes out statewide. Right now, we do know that under the sector rules of the governor's plan for the reopening of Connecticut, that you can play high-risk sports, including indoor sports. So we do know that basketball is being played. We do know that hockey is being played right now. I believe there's some wrestling events that are going on right now. But there is definitely some issues and some concerns as you get to the winter, even beyond the sector rules. So,
right.
For example, when we think about sports like hockey, indoor track,
yep.
Even some swimming, where we're running into this now. But indoor track, hockey particularly, a lot of schools don't have rinks, right? And so a lot of schools are relying on maybe colleges or universities and some of the facilities that they have.
Correct.
Well, those colleges and universities they're restricting people on their campuses right now as well.
Yes.
So access to those sites is very limited, and it just makes sense that we're not going to have access. Our high schools in Connecticut aren't going to have access to a lot of those facilities. So, a sport like indoor track,
yes,
where you rely on facilities like Cox Cage at Yale, the Field House at Wesleyan, those things most likely are not going to be available for high schools to come on campus and use within this COVID climate.
Correct.
So you're very limited in what you can use there. The probability of playing state championship hockey at the Whale, at Yale.
Yep.
It's just highly unlikely this year. And just like they're not playing, they're practicing sports right now, but they're not playing right now.
Correct.
So it just makes sense that you're not going to allow teams to come on campus if you're not allowing other teams within the Ivy League to come on campus for competition, right? So when you start limiting the facilities that are available, that becomes a big concern. Wrestling, right? Most of your wrestling events on weekends are tournament type events where you have 4, 6, 8 teams, 12 teams. That's probably not going to happen. You're at best, I think you're going to be looking at dual meets where you have 2 teams that are just wrestling each other, but it's going to be unlikely that you're going to be in a scenario to have multi-team events happening as we would normally know it. That being said, sports like hockey, basketball, the Department of Health in Connecticut, in their recommendations to CIAC, have largely relied on the National Federation and their classifications of sports.
Okay.
The National Federation classifies basketball and hockey as moderate risk sports. So having that moderate risk category certainly makes things, I think, much more possible in the winter. But again, I think we are working already on the COVID mitigating strategies for that. We'll be continuing to work with our doctors and the epidemiologists that we work with to put solid plans together for those sports. But we are cautiously optimistic that we're going to have those moderate risk indoor sports able to participate and play. Some of those higher risk or those sports reliant on third-party facilities will definitely be more challenging.
Absolutely. Now, how many high schools in the state have their own hockey facility?
I don't know of any.
Okay.
So I don't know of any that do. Indoor track, there's a couple.
Okay.
I think Haddam Killingworth in your area,
I think so.
has a field house.
I believe Haddam Killingworth has a field house.
I think they do. I remember going to a state wrestling tournament up there that was exceptionally well run, and I do think they have a field house up there.
Yep.
Obviously, the field house in New Haven, the Floyd Little Athletic Center. I believe Staples, Wilton, Bethel, I think all have field houses with indoor track facilities. But I can't think of any with a hockey facility. I think they largely use either the rinks within town, the prep school rinks around them, or as I said, the college university rinks.
Ingalls Rink.
Ingalls Rink, gets used quite a bit up there at Yale. I think what other? There's a couple other. There's another one up in Wallingford, I believe. There's an ice rink in Danbury. I know gets used quite a bit. Again, I know. I used to be the principal at Pomperaug High School. I know our kids were in a co-op with Watertown. They skated at Taft, the Taft School there. So as I said, there's prep school facilities, town facilities that get used quite a bit.
Oh, you were up at Pomperaug? I didn't know that.
I was. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Speaking of sports and facilities, one more mutual friend that you and I have, and I heard you on with them the other day. On 960 WELI. That would be our friend.
Coach.
That's right.
That coach.
Speaking of coaches.
Yeah. Coach Matt, no, he's fantastic.
Oh, he's a great guy.
And,
I like George.
Again, you think about those relationships, right? And,
oh, yeah.
I didn't really get to meet Coach until really coming into this role where we've had an opportunity to speak. But but as a player, in a high school player in the mid '90s, and then through my college days and playing, I knew Coach and heard of him, and and he was just one of those legendary figures that you think of everything that he's done, and just another special man who has really dedicated his life to doing things that are in the best interest of kids, and has made such a positive impact. So just really honored to be able to, as a colleague, and call him a friend now, and great guy.
Absolutely awesome guy. So what else do we want to tell everybody about the CIAC and what's going on?
Well, again, I think it's, just that understanding that, again, it is a very student-centered organization. It is an organization that's member-driven.
Okay.
I think, another, not maybe misconception, but, kind of facts that just aren't known about that is how proposals and rule changes come about. Again, it's I think the perception may be that myself or our staff at CIAC, we just here's the rules that we're thinking of, and so we just bring it to the board and we put it through. And that's not the way it goes. Again, CIAC staff, myself included as executive director, I do not have voting rights on any board or subcommittee. So proposals that come to CIAC, they can come in 4 ways. Again, the legislative group of our board are our member school principals.
Yep.
So any member school principal as an individual has the right and the autonomy to bring forward a proposal to any of our sport committees or to the CIAC Board of Control. They don't need any other group to do that. As an individual principal and legislative voting member, they have the right to do that. Beyond that, it is groups that can bring it. So our member leagues can bring it. So, the CCC, the SCC, the Crawl League, there's 11 leagues across the state, the FCIAC, the Berkshire League, the SWC, NCCC, the Pequot, those are the leagues themselves can bring a proposal and offer a proposal to CIAC.
Right.
The Connecticut High School Coaches Association, as a coaches association, they can bring a proposal to CIAC, and the Connecticut Association of Athletic Directors, as an association, they can bring a proposal to the CIAC.
Okay.
So that's the way that proposals come into the organization. Once they come in, the CIAC Board of Control will look at the proposal.
Sure.
If there's interest among the board members to learn more about it, then they may send it to an individual sport committee, or we may send it out to a vetting process. Anytime that we have a new bylaw that's coming into effect, after it makes its way through the sport committee, we do vet that out with the principals, the coaches, and the athletic directors. So we send it out to review for each of those groups. So they provide feedback, and that's all received and reviewed before ultimately it would go back to the Board of Control for final review and either denial or approval at that level.
And the Board of Control has final approval of?
Board of Control has final approval, and again, 19 voting members of that traditionally.
Okay.
Right now, we do not have a past president serving right now, so it reduces it to 18, and we have one member who is just taking some family time right now, so from their position. So so that brings us down to 17 voting members currently. The board chair only votes in the instance of a tie.
Okay.
So he is a voting member, but only votes when there's a tie.
So he breaks the tie.
Only breaks the tie.
Okay.
Yep. And he hasn't needed to vote yet.
Yeah, right.
In the recent I'm going to knock on wood.
Yeah, no kidding.
But,
no kidding.
But that's how the organization runs, and I think it's important for people to understand that it is that member-driven organization, that it is made up of principals and assistant principals from around the state. So when sometimes people ask and say, well, the CIAC doesn't understand what's really happening in schools. Well, we do, and actually the people who are voting on it are current principals.
Our principals, right. Right. Now, explain this to me. let's say Pete Mezzetti coaches lacrosse, and how does Pete Mezzetti's schedule of who they play get set up? Is that the CIAC? Is that the athletic director? How's that work?
Yeah, so the regular season schedules all get set up within leagues, and most
Okay.
of the leagues at this point do have a central scheduler
Gotcha.
who would design those. For those that don't, then would be the athletic directors that do the majority of the work. I think in most leagues there's a league schedule that's set up.
Yep.
There are some sports where there's some agreements amongst leagues to play some out-of-league games
Yes.
to help fill those schedules. But that's where the work of the athletic director is again critically important.
Right.
They're doing a lot of the work with that. So the regular season schedules are all created by the leagues and the individual schools and athletic directors. It is when you get to the state tournament time, the seedings for the state tournament, the
pairings,
schedules, the pairings, the neutral site facilities.
Yep.
That's all determined by CIAC. But all the regular season schedules and all of the league tournaments are all handled within the individual leagues.
Okay. So that means you probably know Brian Atkins, who's the lacrosse coach
Yes.
down at Foran.
Yes.
Jim May at Brantford.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, story programs, and I think, geez, we've been I think we're up at Brian McMahon is where the state championships have been held for pretty much annually for
Absolutely.
For quite a bit of time. And again, lacrosse is just it's one of those sports that have really taken off over the past decade.
Absolutely.
And has again just been a great outlet for our boys and girls across the state, and some really highly competitive games. And
It is.
Yeah, and you think about another just I think interesting stat that we like to look at on an annual basis. So we have just over 70,000 athletes on an annual basis.
Oh, wow.
In Connecticut. And when you think about that in comparison to enrolled students, we have about 166,000 kids in grades 9 through 12 enrolled in our public schools in Connecticut. So you're looking at about 43% of the students enrolled in schools are participating in interscholastic athletics.
Sure.
It is by far the widest ranging extracurricular that kids are participating in.
Absolutely.
And then, of those kids participating in that, our Connecticut numbers are pretty standard compared to the rest of the country, where about 6% of those kids will go on to play at the collegiate level. And about 2% of those kids will actually get scholarship money at the collegiate level to play. So, on the one hand, you look at where 94% of the kids participating, their careers, their sport careers will end with high school.
Right.
But we see that that percentage that does go on, and I'll tell you, I think lacrosse is one of those sports where we do see quite a few kids at the Division I and II level from Connecticut doing an exceptional job.
One of the favorite stories that I like to tell is during I believe it was last year, I did a lacrosse show on my show. So I had myself, Brendan Highland, who's the Morgan boys lacrosse coach, Jim May, Frank Barron, who I'm sure do you know Frank?
I don't know Frank.
Frank was a great guy. Frank passed away of pancreatic cancer recently, and so Frank's no longer with us. And we actually had, during the panel discussion, John Raba, the Wesleyan boys lacrosse coach.
Wow.
We had we did an hour show, but we had the best time. It was just, we all were just telling stories, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
All the memories that you have on a lacrosse field. Because I do social media for Morgan boys lacrosse, and I miss not seeing all the coaches, all the different coaches we run into all over throughout the year, my players. It's like, they canceled the lacrosse season. I'm like, okay, now what do I do in the spring? It's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God.
There's so much that we, that we've lost,
Right.
and and while we want to get back to that sense of normal, we do have to, continue to remind ourselves we are playing in a pandemic.
Right.
There is not a vaccine just yet.
Right.
And so, those are things that we have to be realistic about,
Absolutely.
and be a little bit more cautious about. To that same token, we are very concerned about the mental health of kids and the social emotional health
Right.
of kids as well. So
Absolutely.
so you try to balance, that very real existence of COVID that's there, with also, the very real existence that we're seeing increased rates of anxiety and depression amongst high school and adolescent kids right now. We're
Right.
seeing from March to a June timeframe, we saw about a 50% reduction in structured physical activity outlets for kids. So, we do understand the immense value of those structured activities. And as you said, it's not about getting on the field to win.
No.
It's about getting on the field to have those relationships, to be
Absolutely.
engaged in that activity. That is just, it's healthy for our bodies and for our minds to be out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure during the pandemic and what's going on now, schools are going to look a lot different because everybody's online, learning online, but then you go into the school for your half of the week. I'm sure the school building looks a lot more different because everybody's probably social distanced and.
Sure does, and it's such a departure from what we were talking about previously. You think about best practices within schools,
Right.
and you were really working from an educational model standpoint of getting kids in small groups, really
Right.
thinking about that collaboration and ways that you could foster learning through inquiry, creative thinking, critical thinking type of scenarios. But now you're in a scenario from a COVID standpoint where you're back to desks and straight rows. So as you said,
Right.
spacing kids out. Those hybrid scenarios. A big piece that for CIAC, when we were trying to think about what should we recommend in terms of fan attendance.
Right.
Well, when we look at the what was put in place for return policies in a lot of schools,
Yeah.
their return policies are really limiting the exposure or the availability of guests to come on campus during the school day.
Right.
So, where generally you would welcome a parent to come in, meet with a teacher.
Yeah.
Well, you're really limiting those to essential meetings right now. And that's
Exactly.
from a sports standpoint, we look at and say, okay, if we're going to limit the guests coming on campus for a COVID mitigating strategy during curricular time, when we get to sports, which we view as an extension of the curriculum, sports is not a separate part of a curriculum.
No.
It is an extension of the curriculum.
Correct.
It's the extracurricular, right? So, so we thought that it was important for our recommendation to align with that. So as you said, you're looking at how things have really changed in terms of the manner that we're teaching students and trying to engage students from that curriculum standpoint, and that flows right into the athletic end as well.
Right. Now, as far as if we do pull off winter sports, in this particular like high school basketball, how are they going to do fan attendance at a basketball game? Are they probably going to have to cut it down, or?
I think our recommendation, unless something significantly changes with the COVID climate, would likely stay the same. Right now, we're
Okay.
recommending that you don't have fans in attendance, but
Right.
it is up to the discretion of the local school districts. We would, anticipate that if things are going well, that our school districts, again, will be creative and find some ways to honor kids and parents for those senior nights,
Right.
and find some ways to, to do some inclusive closure activities for kids that, again, we understand, talking to our spring kids and our winter kids last year, that was really significant portion, particularly our spring kids, when they talked about what they really missed.
Right.
It really, a lot of what they shared with us closure activities, they talked about they didn't get senior night.
Yeah, right.
They talked about they didn't get senior prom.
Right.
They didn't get their senior trip. They didn't get, so when you started, really listening and then kind of breaking down and charting out what were the experiences they missed the most, it was closure activities.
Right.
So you want to try to provide that as much as we can. And again, that gets back to really caring for the kids' mental and social emotional well-being as much as their physical well-being in the sports that they're playing.
Now, I'm sure as executive director of the CIAC, but like you said, you used to be a principal of a school and an administrator. With everything that's going on with online learning, do they know, as far as the teachers and administrators, like let's say a school starts at 7:15, I'm sure there's a way of tracking them and letting them know that John Smith isn't logged in yet and it's 7:19. Is there a way of?
Sure. Yeah. The technology is amazing today.
Yeah.
But again, I think the concern that you have is the equity divide in that.
Right.
So the technology absolutely allows you, whether you're using technology like Google Meets or Google Classroom, whatever type of system you're using, you can track the kid logging in. But then there's discussions as well of do you put the camera on or don't you put the camera on?
Right.
Are teachers and kids comfortable with somebody seeing the background of their home?
Right.
And kind of thinking through those scenarios, and then also thinking in some of our urban areas about not only do the kids have the devices, but do the kids have the connectivity in terms of internet access to be able to work. And I know that, again, I think the State Department of Education under Commissioner Cardona, who has just been tremendous through this, really can't say enough about how informative and collaborative Commissioner Cardona has been. He's been amazing. And even, I think the governor's office there as well, really working to try to provide as much connectivity and devices as possible to our students. But there's still a divide, and there's still more work that needs to be done there. So yes, the technology gives you the ability to do that.
Right.
But technology will never replace the connection of the student and teacher.
Right. Absolutely.
Just as you had, before all this happened, you might have a conversation where one teacher says, this kid, I just can't get him to do work in my class. And then the next teacher will say, really, he does everything for me. and it's just the connection that and the relationship that happens there that, that they'll work for you. And so technology isn't going to change the part where, we have to capture the kids' hearts first, and then we can teach their minds anything. I think the technology makes it a little bit more difficult to do that, but we have, again, some incredibly innovative teachers who are just doing an amazing job, and principals that are doing a great job with leadership in that.
Absolutely. Now, if people want more information on CIAC, where can they go? CASCIAC.org is the main website. Once you bring that up, the left-hand side will have an icon for CAS. If you're interested in the Connecticut Association of School Size, the icon on the left will be the CIAC icon. So you can click on either of those, and it takes you right into the websites, and a tremendous amount of information on the website on both sides of the organization there. I'm going to say, I'm sure the website is updated regularly.
Updated regularly. Also, feel free to share us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you hit we have a great group. Again, very talented public relations people with Joel Cookson, John Holt, working with us, Aaron Garino, Mary Lee Weber. So a lot of good information on social media as well.
I've never met Joel Cookson, but he seems like a nice guy.
Great guy, good, sports information director, does an amazing job, comes with a lot of experience from the collegiate level, and does a real good job.
I'm going to say, and John Holt, who used to work for one of the networks here in Connecticut.
Yeah, John Holt is just, we are so fortunate to have John working with us, and his talents just from a broadcasting standpoint, but really as well. John is an extraordinary storyteller.
Yeah.
So his ability to connect with kids and share out their story in an artistic fashion is just second to none.
Cool. Glenn Lungarini from the CIAC, thanks for coming down. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
My pleasure, Pete.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. On behalf of Glenn, I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks, good night, and we'll see you next time.